mostly the Mad here, with a guide for Katarin to unify Kislev and either confederate Kostaltyn or make him a military ally on turn 2. Either way, you'll end up with a ton of money and territory on turn 2, but keeping Kostaltyn alive as an ally will give you the ability to drag him into wars and earn extra supporter points for fighting against the Orthodoxy's enemies. This guide is extremely cheesy. You may not want to go this far in your campaign, but along the way, I'll explain a few tips and tricks for the new Kislev that you might find useful anyway. Fight the first battle manually and be careful with this one. It's a tricky battle, and if you take too many casualties, that can lower your faction strength a little bit, making confederations a little harder. One tactic that has worked for me is to move my ranged units and Katarin back into a corner and then use my mobility units to try to pull the enemy army apart and feed part of their army into my gun line while I try and take out their horse archers. The Marauder horsemen are quite hard to deal with. They'll kill the cat by themselves and they'll outrun your cavalry and just shoot them to death. So it can be tricky. Sometimes you can catch them, sometimes you can pincer them in between the cat and the horses. Otherwise you can just kite them away with the cat, as long as you're careful not to let the cat get shot. If you take a lot of damage, remember you can run down routers at the end to increase the amount of replenishment you can get in the post battle. Also, this is the first battle of the campaign, so if you take too much damage, maybe just restart and try the battle again. If you don't need the replenishment, sacrifice captives can be useful for the extra campaign movement range, but you don't get that extra movement immediately after the battle. The movement buff takes effect starting from the start of next turn, and getting the buff multiple times will extend the duration. Attack Vertivo, fight it manually, take minimal casualties, then sack the settlement, and then you'll have enough movement to reoccupy it as well. Having no buildings in Vertivo is actually helpful. If it's empty like this, that's great. If there was a building in there, demolish it over the end turn, and that's going to help us later on. You want to recruit an extra lord here at Vertivo, recruit a couple of extra units. Also recruit another lord at Kislev. Make sure you recruit a different type of lord at each different settlement. The pool of recruitable lords only replenishes one of each type per turn. So if you recruit a different one, then that means we'll get 2 new lords next turn. Recruit a couple of units here as well. Then we can just do a little bit of diplomacy for extra money. And Cells of Vastra to the Druzhina Enclave for some extra money. And that'll also raise their relations by 40. So we can confederate them next turn and get that land back. You can also join Malachai's war against the Maggot King in exchange for a trade agreement plus some money. Declare war on Kalfranz's enemy, Kazarek. And you can join Oslin's war against Nordland as well. Just a little bit of extra money, and none of these minor factions are going to be a threat to you. Make sure Katarin's got Route Marcher. In Kislev, we're going to have tons of money at the end of this, so you don't really need to build money buildings. So you can just build double growth or whatever buildings you want, it doesn't matter. Just remember, don't build anything in Vertivo or demolish the building if there's a building there. Choose whatever technology you want. On turn 2, we're going to have to fight a bear sling army somewhere around here. It could be around here, there could be here, there could be inside the settlement. There's a bit of RNG, depending on what you do with your diplomacy or where you place this lord. If this lord's up here, that might affect where this lord ends up being on the next turn. You can try recruiting units in this lord instead of with Katarin. If you recruit with the other lord, just use Katarin to grab those units back while she's in that 0 movement area of the settlement without using any of her movement up. Then you can use this lord to scout a little bit. This time the army spawned here. That's unfortunately in range of the settlement, so they are going to be reinforced by the settlement, but we can use that to our advantage to try to kill some of the settlement at the same time, make it a bit easier. If the enemy army move to, say, here in the forest, you got to be a bit careful, because if you use Katarin's movement to go here, she may not have enough movement to also hit the settlement. And you need Katarin to be the one to siege Jakova, because she's the only lord that has siege attacker. So use your secondary lord to initiate the battle if the enemy is too far off Katarin's direct line to Jakova. In this case, it's kind of like a direct straight run for her. So you can just go and attack this lord and then attack the settlement afterwards. Just get ready to hit backspace, and then when she gets close, just hit backspace to stop her movement so that you can bring in your other lords to help you out. Press R to speed up or slow down their movement on the campaign map. By having 3 lords involved in the battle, that means we're going to have 3 chances for magic items to drop, and also these 2 other lords will get 50% of the experience that Katarin gets. And additionally to that, we'll get extra bonus support for each extra lord. So instead of just getting 10 support for just Katarin fighting this lord, we'll get an extra 10 for each lord. So we'll get 30 support for fighting this battle with all 3 lords together. Again, just fight it manually, try to take minimal casualties. I actually forgot this step, but at this point, before the battle, you should recruit 2 ogre mercenaries. If the Besenling army is already inside the settlement at the start of turn 2, it's going to be a little bit of a harder battle, but it should still be doable either way. Now, if you didn't do it already, at this point, you should hire a couple of ogre mercenaries. Notice we got plus 30 support from battles against chaos because we had 3 armies involved rather than just the 10 we would have gotten for just 1 army. We could get an extra battle out of attacking this retreating army and get even more support from that, but next turn, it's not covered by this guide, but next turn I want to take Igorov, so I'm going to just attack the settlement so that I can force march up towards Igorov and take that next turn. Still bring in the 2 extra lords so that we get the extra drop chance and support for fighting the settlement. Again, try to minimize the amount of casualties that you take. Sack the settlement so you can move Katarin up towards Igorov, then occupy the settlement with one of your other lords. Those 2 settlements are all you need to take in order to confederate all of Kislev. However, there are still a lot of diplomacy shenanigans that you have to do first. Before we get started properly, just trade Forjakova in exchange for Naganov to Ostermark. Then recruit a new lord at Naganov. Sell Naganov back to Ostermark again, and then declare war on Ostermark. Retake both settlements, Naganov and Forchakova, and finally make peace again with Ostermark and get them to pay you for the privilege. So now we've got an extra settlement to play with, and we've got an extra lord that slightly increases our faction strength. Next, you want to confederate the Druzhina Enclave. First, trade them Forchakova for all of their money, then trade them Naganov, get a little bit of money for that too, and finally trade them Vativo and get a little bit more money. You could region trade back and forth a little bit more to make more money and raise their relations even higher. You could give them some gifts to raise their relations even higher, but that should be just enough to get their relations over 50. You get a sort of a friends bonus to confederation when you have over 50 relations. Normally, when their relations are heading towards a certain number, it will update at the end of each turn. And I think it goes up by a quarter of the difference. But you can make it update straight away by declaring war on them. So they will take a minus 30 penalty because you declare war. So instead of 186, it'll be heading to 156. And then we should get a quarter of that difference heading towards 156. So that'll be 137. So we should get plus 34 relations, which is just enough to put it over 50 and give us that friends bonus. Yeah, so now we're at 53. And then we go back in, we make peace. And then with the friends bonus, that gives us enough to give us the confederation. Confederating the Druzhina gives us Fort Ostrosk, which Throt was probably just about to conquer, and also gives us back Zavastra that we traded to them on the first turn. And that gives us access to region trade with Ostland. But first, recruit an extra lord at Zavastra. Then go into diplomacy with Ostland and trade Zavastra for Castle Rorken.
Very well.
Now that gives us Castle Rorken, where we can recruit another lord. And this lord is in range to recruit mercenary ogres from Golgfag. So we can grab 2 more ogres there, which will further increase our faction strength, as well as these 2 extra lords that make us stronger as well. Then, of course, we declare war on Ostland again, retake Zavastra, make peace with Ostland, and get them to pay us for a privilege. And then you can also make peace with Nordland, if you like, by selling them Castle von Rorken, or you can keep it for yourself. Now that we have an extra province in Fort Ostrosk, we can recruit another lord there to further increase our faction strength. Now you're ready to confederate the Robsman clan. Confederating the Robsman clan will give you vision on our Baal, although if you're strong enough, he may not necessarily attack you. But I usually like to sort of stop at this step and maybe wait till turn 4 or 5. I usually just wait until Throt attacks Robsman clan. And as soon as Throt goes to war with Robsman clan, then I just confederate them so that he can't take it. But if you want to get everything on turn 2, we're now ready to take Robsman. So we have to region trade with Robsman, and we can region trade Fort Ostrosk for Plesk, first of all. Then we can trade him Zavastra. Then we can trade him Naganov. Even though he's got no money left, just take as much money as you can each time, because you want to make him as broke as possible. We want to put him as far as possible into debt. Robsman's a little bit harder to confederate, so we have to really pump the relations up. Next, we want to trade him Tivo. Then we want to trade him Fort Jakova in exchange for one of his settlements. But when you have a really valuable settlement like Fort Jakova, you don't want to trade it just once because that only gives you plus 40 relations. You want to trade it to get one of your own settlements back, and then you can trade that settlement back to him again for another 40 relations. Then we've got Volksgrad. You can trade that for Vativo. And this is why having Vativo as a low value settlement is kind of good, because you can always trade them Vativo first, then take Vativo back when you trade them a more valuable settlement. And then we can trade him Plesk in exchange for Naganov. And then lastly, we can sell him back Naganov and Vativo again. Now, the friends bonus, plus 50 friends bonus, is not going to be enough to get the Robsman clan to confederate. We need to get them to plus 150 relations, which gives them the best friend bonus, which for any hard confederation, you basically need to get the relations over 150 to get that best friend bonus to make it happen. Again, it's going to update towards 309 when we declare war on them, but only a quarter of the way there. So that's not going to get us to 150. We need the relation to be heading towards about 850, so that when we go to war and update it, then we'll get them to over 150, and then they'll take the confederation. So at this point, we just want to give them a bunch of gifts. And because they're completely broken in debt, a small gift only costs them 200 gold. So 4 small gifts for 800 gold will give them plus 40 relations. So it's actually cheaper to do small gifts, whereas a large gift will put them up 40 relations, but just in one go, but it costs the same as 5 small gifts. So it's actually cheaper to go small gifts, but just to save myself some RSI, I'm just going to do large gifts. And we just want to give them a ton of large gifts until the relation gets up to heading towards 850. Because he's so in debt, the price doesn't go up. If he was not in debt, all this money that we're giving him would make him richer, which would make him ask for more money for the gifts. So you got to make sure that you completely bankrupt him and put him into debt in that first section when you're region trading back and forth. Do as many region trades as you possibly can. So heading towards 669, and just keep giving him more and more gifts. He's not broke anymore, so he's actually asking for more money now. Like, we've still got some money left. And 869, yeah, so that should be enough now that he's heading towards 869. Now we declare war on him. That will update the relations, and then we can get the confederation, because he's at over 150. So it means that he gets the best friend bonus and he confederates. Okay, so now we have most of Kislev confederated, but we still have to confederate Kostaltyn. He's going to be a lot harder to confederate, as he's quite a bit stronger than the Robsman clan. So just to get a little bit of extra faction strength, we'll confederate the Brotherhood of the Bear first, but we can't connect onto them at the moment, so we'll trade Fort Ostrosk to Kostaltyn in exchange for Zoishenk. Zoishenk just connects on to the Brotherhood. Also take all of Kostaltyn's money at the same time. Now we can connect onto the Brotherhood of the Bear. So we'll trade Zoishenk to them. And then Zoishenk will allow them to connect onto Prague and also Zavastra. Now we've got Vativo. Vativo's not worth as much, so you can trade them Vativo first. Then every time you trade them a settlement, you trade Vativo back again. Then we trade them Vativo again. And then we trade them Vativo again. So you're essentially just getting like double relations, because you just keep trading Vativo every time you trade another settlement. And then we trade them Volksgrad, get Vativo back. And then we trade them Naganov is not worth much as well, similar to Vativo. Then trade them Fort Jakova. Naganov back.
Fear not.
And
You
trade
stand
them
with a boyar of Kislev.
And lastly, trade them Naganov. So now they're heading towards 498, minus 30 because of the war we're about to declare. So they'll be heading towards 468. Divide that by 4. That'll still be enough to get us to plus 50. So we declare war. And the friend bonus is enough to get the confederation. And we get all of our settlements back again. Now we've got one extra lord, making our faction strength slightly higher again. Now, if you want to make an alliance with Kostaltyn, skip the next section, which covers confederation, and go straight to the alliance section of the guide. Even with all that faction strength, and even with all the positive relations we'll be able to get him over 150 by trading him all these regions. That still won't be enough. So we'll have to do some extra shenanigans to get Kostaltyn. The first thing we want to do is go to war with the Goromandni tribe, because we're going to want to drag Kostaltyn into a war with them. So we'll go into diplomacy with Kostaltyn and start trading regions to him as we did before. We can trade him Zavastra to give access to our eastern regions. Obviously, take 2,000 gold from him every time you do a trade if you can. And we keep doing the thing of selling him Vertivo and then selling him, you know, another region to get Vertivo back again. So we get maximum amount of relations by kind of getting double trade on each region trade. And then we want to trade him Vertivo again. Then we want to trade him for Jakova, get Vertivo back, and get him to go to war with the Goromandni tribe. And then I'll make him feel a little bit more threatened and more likely to confederate. Plus a little bit of cash. We need to make him as broke as possible, so make sure you get every bit of money that you can from him. Keep trading him Vertivo back every time. He still won't be threatened enough though, so trade him the Bay of Blades to make him go to war with the Magathkin. Then we sell him Prague to get back Vertivo, sell him Vertivo again, sell him Volksgrad to get Vertivo back again, then sell him Vertivo again. Then finally we sell Plesk to get Vertivo back, sell Vertivo again, and then sell Nagenhof. And it's important that we do all of these trades so we get his relations as high as possible and we make him as broke and in debt as possible. Because now we're going to give him gifts to keep raising his relations. The amount that it costs for a small, medium, or large gift depends on how much money the faction has. So if they're completely and utterly broke and in debt like Kostaltyn is, a small gift will only cost 200 gold. But if you gift that faction thousands and thousands of gold like we're about to, they can potentially get out of debt, and as they get richer, those gifts get more expensive to the point where we might not be able to afford them anymore. So hopefully we've made Kostaltyn indebted enough. Small gifts are actually cheaper in this situation, but just to save RSI and time, I'm just going to use large gifts. Now just keep gifting them more and more and more gifts until their relations is heading towards about plus 850. If Kostaltyn actually gets out of debt and his treasury goes up, you'll see the amount of these gifts starting to go up, 1,700, 2,000, 3,000, etc. In this case, it looks like we made him broke enough and we're not going to run out of money. And yep, he's over 850 now. So when we go to war with him, that will adjust his relations to over plus 150, and we should get the Confederation. Now, if you want a bit of a challenge campaign, then the turn 2 Confederation is great. You're going to have a lot of territory. You're going to have this extra Kostaltyn army here with a legendary lord that you can use to attack on the west while Katarin attacks on the east. But you are surrounded by a whole bunch of enemies, and you lose the ability to pull Kostaltyn into your wars. Whenever you fight a battle against Chaos, you get bonus points towards your Ice Court support, but you don't get any points towards Orthodoxy support unless Kostaltyn is also at war with that same faction. So if I was to attack Goromandni tribe now, I would get Ice Court support fighting Chaos, but because Kostaltyn's faction doesn't exist anymore, I don't get any Orthodoxy support. If I'd stopped before I confederated him, when he was at war with them, then I would get Orthodoxy support as well. Getting too out of balance with Ice Court or Orthodoxy doesn't matter that much. This is from my Kostaltyn campaign, but this is the absolute maximum penalty you can get, whether you're 3 points of tier difference or 20 points of tier difference between Orthodoxy and Ice Court. It's not that bad. But if you want to maximize your support gains for both sides, you might want to keep Kostaltyn as an ally. If we go back to just after we confederated the Brotherhood of the Bear, but before we confederated Kostaltyn, there's a few different ways that you might want to set up the alliance with Kostaltyn, depending on how much territory and which territory you want to give him. One way that I like to do it is to set Kostaltyn up as my shield of the north, basically, and give him everything up to here so that he completely blocks me off from the Goromandni tribe and Throt, and then I can just concentrate on taking out Azag. Then I can sell Azag's territory to Ungrim if I want to have a strong ally kind of guarding the mountains to the east, and then you can turn your attention to Draika if you want, or Festus or whatever, and you know, attack targets in the south while Kostaltyn holds down the north. Initially, he won't be at war with the Goromandni tribe or with Throt, so he won't like straight away lose settlements. But assuming that you want to eventually take these settlements for yourself, he'll probably will get attacked at some point and lose some of that stuff. By the time you've finished down south, you can come back up, retake those settlements, maybe trade some different settlements to Kostaltyn to keep him alive, but sort of get the better territories for yourself. Or you might just let him keep holding that while you come through, take out Throt and Throg. However, just be aware that if you take out Throt and Throg, then he's less likely to actually fail quickly. So you might be waiting a long time before you can actually get your territory back. So that's one way you could do it. The way that you make Kostaltyn a military ally is basically the same as Confederation, except that you don't want to drag him into any extra wars. Just trade him regions back and forth as much as you can, being careful not to sell him any regions that you don't want him to have. Make him as broke as possible, again with the region trading, and then give him tons and tons of gifts. Now, because we don't have as many regions to trade, he won't be as broke. So eventually the gift price will actually start going up, but we've got plenty of money. And in this scenario, we want him to be our ally. So it doesn't hurt to give him a bit of money to make him stronger. Just keep giving him gifts until you get his relations up to about plus 600. Then declare war to update his relations, then make peace and take the military alliance at the same time. Because he's your military ally, you'll be able to pull him into wars so that you can get the orthodoxy support bonus. Just be aware that if you immediately declare war against a really strong faction, even if he hates them, he might decline. But if you initially declare war against, you know, a fairly weak faction, then he should be fine to join. There you go. You know, we just pulled him into a war with Goromandy tribe. You know, wouldn't necessarily want to go to war with him initially, but that's just as an example. Once you've declared war on at least one weak faction, then you should be able to pull him into wars with larger factions with no problem. Whereas if I had declared war on Azazel straight away, he probably would have declined. Oh, also, apparently, if you declare war on those roving beastman tribes or rogue armies, I guess any factions that don't have settlements, then that can make your allies immediately break your alliance. So don't pull them into those wars. Anyway, so this is just one example of how you could set it up with him as sort of a shield at the top. The way that I actually prefer to do it is to stop even earlier than that. I just confederate only the Druzhina clan on turn 2 to get Fort Ostrosk, and then I'll region trade Fort Ostrosk and Zavastra and some other regions in order to position the Ropsman clan so that they're ready to confederate, but I won't actually confederate them straight away. I'll just leave them there. Again, they're not at war with Throt yet, so I'll just wait, and as soon as Throt goes to war with the Ropsman clan, then I'll confederate them. Then he'll have no enemy, which will sort of pause him again, giving me more time to finish off Azag down here. And usually I'm able to get back and attack Throt when he's not ready before he has actually declared war on me. Alternatively, you could trade those regions to Kostaltyn to block Throt if you wanted to. And the longer you wait before confederating, the more time the AI has to build up those settlements, maybe to a higher tier, or build a barracks building or something that you can then inherit when you confederate it. And obviously you vary the strategy depending on what's going on in the campaign, but that's roughly how I like to do it. Anyway, hopefully this has given you a few tips and tricks on how you can manage Kislev's early game and just some general understanding on how to manipulate confederations. Thanks, guys.